let's talk about momentum. But I'm going to be meandering here a little bit. So normally, this is where I really miss working in an office or just working with other people, where you could have these longer conversations where you can just have back and forth and people didn't have to answer right away, but instead they could come back later and have their thoughts on it. So take that with this. Nothing is saying that this is truth exactly, but I'm looking at, so League of Geeks, Australian developer, is announcing they're essentially shutting down today. And they have a bunch of interesting games, but those games have not found the market that they needed to sustain themselves. And it's this weird thing that I'm seeing. And yeah, I'm not blaming this for our own problems. I mean, I am, but yeah, is I guess why I have insight or thinking about this, which is also why I can be biased and be wrong. But what I'm seeing is, like, go back to 2007 if you can. In 2007, rock paper shotgun started. All right, those young lads started the website as a way to talk about games that weren't getting coverage, and essentially discovering kind of gems in the rough, there, diamonds in the rough, and they were able to elevate them and get people excited about them. And that drove a lot of traffic to them. And there was a lot of value in discovering things. And remember when Steam came out with Greenlight, I would have developers tell me that it's ruining games. Now I understand not being able to predict your release schedule is super problematic, but my point back then was, name a diamond in the rough that's undiscovered that isn't your game. Meaning you can't have the bias of picking your game. Show me some other game that you think that is deserving of being on Steam that isn't currently on Steam. And it became this thing where it was really hard to do because there's so much value in uncovering those games and showing the world those, right? If you had a website, like you were golden. It became Rock, Paper, Shotgun before they turned evil. They got bought by IGN, and now they'll just do what IGN does. What IGN does is say, what performs well? That's it. They're like a search engine. What performs well? This drives us traffic. We're going to amplify it. So they are almost unbiased in the sense of that. Remember the scammy FPS? They promoted the hell out of that because that drove a bunch of traffic to them. They didn't decide to say, hey, this looks suspect. They're like, no, this is awesome because it drives us traffic. And that is what you see. Like, I saw developers talking this week about Next Fest. And saying, well, it used to be a way for unknown games to kind of have this bubble up, and there's a bunch of unknown games and people are discovering them. And now there's some preordained ones because it did pre-press. They're set and those get elevated, and those get a lot of the press coverage out of Next Fest. And that said, if they do well at Next Fest, or if they are the surprising one, then they get a bunch of amplification. But nobody's amplifying the things that just do okay, that people to discover and say, hey, these are cool. They're only doing the ones that are like at the very top. And so then this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of, I know, you can tell me a bunch of indie games that were big hits, and that's what I'm kind of pointing out. They're the problem in a way, because it used to be, we didn't have these super giant hits out of this. We just had a bunch of games that were doing pretty well. But you're seeing less and less of that, and things like, League of Geeks shutting down is kind of consistently hitting solid doubles isn't enough. You have to hit home runs, and it's becoming this kind of lottery thing where you have to hit the home run or you're sunk. And I mean, we kind of see that in ourselves of, I think we're averaging right now like 15 to 20 concurrent. We're a small game, tiny game. I call it a community game. You play it with your friends. But that is a dead game. Well, you can't grow from that then if people won't buy it because it's a dead game. You can also look at our negative reviews because we're the most hated game ever because Epic Online Services is not spyware. Okay. But ignoring that is something that you see again and again, especially with multiplayer games and again, you can point to me to games that don't do this. And there are a couple of these middle ones that kind of find their way. And I often find it's because they have a strong single player component that if people just dig the game, they could just dig the game. Ambiotic. Oh, come on. What's? Oh my God. I should pull these up before I start babbling. You know what I'm talking about. Ambiotic factor. is one that kind of like isn't the biggest game ever, but is doing well. And then there's other games that literally you can see the press salivating over and lining up, and it becomes this self-fulfilling thing, right? And it really becomes this kind of, hey, this feeds us. We can do articles about this because we will get traffic. If we don't get traffic, we won't do articles about this, right? It's this weird circular thing that is just killing mid-sized games. And so I don't think about that now as for our current game, because our current game is what it is. It's going to do what it's going to do. I've come to grips with that. But as I think of launching, like, and how do you launch something, and it really is. And I thought I was going to talk about it this week, and I haven't yet. Maybe I will. But like, how do you do that? How do you launch something that you know is going to be not crazy? Like, you can't predict Lethal Company, right? That comes somewhat out of the blue and somewhat well-designed, and you get lucky. But I know there's other well-designed games that I don't see the same level of success, right? But good on them. Like, I am cheering the successes. Let's be clear. I am not being negative about the successes. I'm just saying, how do we have space for those things that aren't? How do we have space for those games? Like, there's a lot of games in the world now, and it's like we're getting this really stratification of, like, there's the high-end ones that everybody plays. And, that's the tribalism falls into this then, because then instead of like, as a player, not as a developer, as a player, I look at mid games, and like I was going through all of the FPSs recently, and all of them, but a bunch of them, and you can see my previous video, and like each one of those I'm cheering for, I'm hoping the best for. But there's this tribalism now where people want to be negative, where they want to hate on the game, where they want to attack the game because it isn't the biggest thing ever, and it's not Fortnite, so man, you suck, right? And there's this weird tribalism. There's this weird, people feel validated or good about themselves because they're tearing apart somebody's effort. And it's just strange. It is just strange. And that's mixing in because I think it's because the news websites in particular, which do generate traffic, have decided they only care about things that generate traffic. And so what gets reviewed now, what gets coverage, it's not even reviews anymore, right? It's those endless guides and everything else comes from things that they think will drive traffic. And you don't have sites like Rock, Paper, Shotgun doing what they did anymore because there's not a lot of value in that. I know John's gone off and done, in particular, his own kind of site that's about uncovering unknown games and stuff. But it's not the same kind of thing, right? It hasn't found the same kind of niche or growth because times have changed and we've stopped caring about that middle, even as players, and started just amplifying the really big games. And that's kind of why I've been trying to find these like smaller games of like, hey, is there a market if I made a single player first person shooter? It's gonna be funny because I could try to be serious. I always try to start serious. Everything I make, I try to start to be the most serious thing ever. I'm making jokes halfway through. But like start there and like, is there a space for it? Can that find a big enough of an audience that like, this is that weird thing of like, don't want to become rich off of it, want to be able to make the next thing. I'm already fine. They'll take care of me. I'm good. So I can do these experiments of what's in the middle. And yes, and when I say do these experiments, I'm not doing something new. There's a bunch of people doing this already and really successful at it who are better at it than me. Right? There are a whole bunch of people in this space doing this. I'm not trying to say like I'm doing something new or so. Like there's a bunch of people doing it. I'm just thinking about me doing it and how I think about it and how I approach it and how that world exists now and what's going on in that space and how can you be successful enough that it funds the next one, because I'm always a fan of making sure that you're at least cycling back in money and being able to fund the next one and being able to provide for other people who are helping you build it and blah, 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 right? So that's what I've been thinking about. And I'm kind of curious about, like, it's a little bit of a question of like, how do you find games now? How do you choose games now? And man, don't ever wish anything negative on a developer who tried. I just say that. But yeah, it's just, that's my ramble today. It just feels like we are just in this world where momentum is everything. And if you don't have momentum, you can no longer find it back, because there's this glee in celebrating you not having momentum. And there's this negativity of no one will give you coverage or care about you because you don't have that momentum. And then is there a world or a place for it to exist where you find that back? Like I find long form podcasts sometimes interview people who I didn't know their stuff, and then I'll go play some of their stuff. And that is helpful. Yeah, I don't know. I just really worry we're in this weird spot where I will talk about some of the struggles of like indie dev or whatever, and it'll get thrown back in my face. But well, at least the company did it. It was one guy. Oh yeah, awesome for him. Like super awesome for him. I am super happy for him. But like that isn't the rule. That isn't a reproducible way to approach it. I mean, some of it I think is just building community, and like that's one of the reasons why we just hang out and we play games in our Discord, and I don't care if it's not our game. First of all, because I like to have a good group of people I can play games with, because I like to play multiplayer games where I'm not aggravated with the people I play, but also just because this lets us grow that community for long term, so that we can test things with them and share things with them and see what they have to say. And maybe it's not the right fit. Like there's a bunch of people I interact with regularly on our Discord that don't actually play the games I make because they don't care for those games, and that's cool and that's fine. I wish more people could be like that. It's also why I will block anybody in our Discord who is mean to anybody, because I really like our community, and it just keeps growing very nicely lately. It's been really busy. It's been really hard to keep up with everybody. So that is my meandering. Yeah, I don't know. I just do worry that we're just having the middle or the mid just be decimated right now. And it's a whole bunch of things, because it's funding now, because to their credit, the VCs and publishers can see that the middle's struggling, and they could look at their own stats and realize that, hey, we need 1 hit out of 5. And that 1 now needs to be a monster hit, because the 5 aren't doing middling numbers anymore. They're doing low numbers. And what does that do? And so then people are less likely to fund inside of here. And we're seeing a big pullback there. And that's affecting what you're seeing with studios. And it's also affecting a lot of studios not starting, even unless you have some pedigree that you can start on. And so, we're going to be then seeing less and less of these middle games. And then there'll be less and less value of these double A games inside of that ecosystem. And then, Xbox doesn't care about them, and Xbox now only cares about Call of Duty 5 times a year or whatever. Yeah. But people were surprised that was going to be on Game Pass. Are you serious? That was the whole point. Oh my God. Really? Oh, yeah. So I don't know. Right. But that's if everyone goes to Game Pass, that now is a negative for the mid, because now you have to make a game cheaply enough that the money you get, which has now been decimated from Game Pass, needs to cover your development. And yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's what I've been thinking about this morning, and just wanted to have a conversation about it. So there's no right or wrong here. You can tell me I'm wrong on this one. I'm fine with that. Don't yell at me. Don't get tribal. Don't attack me.